Good afternoon. Christian Sigman, Hamilton County Administrator. Just work up the street here. First, let me thank everyone for inviting me to this event. This is always fun because it stretches my mind to think about issues. Actually, there's no conflict. You're not going to see a big sparking thing between us because I think just cover kind of the concepts behind it. I've been the county administrator for about 5 years. I've been in government about 28 years. I did a couple of years in the private sector. And I've seen the full range of privatization, contracting out, outsourcing, and the term changes depending what decade you're in. And right now when I hear privatization, most people think like the toll road or the prisons. Now, I'm going to pick on the toll road for a second here. Those are big privatization efforts versus contracting out. Because in the privatization effort, you're actually ceding the ability of another entity to operate it, yes, but if there's a fee involved, you're letting them actually change the fee too. So in the case of the toll road, Indiana privatized the toll road. They got a big slug of money, hundreds of millions of dollars, and the company that got the contract maintains it and operates. But that company also decides when the tolls are increased or not. A policy decision by an elected official. Versus contracting out, in its traditional sense, how I view it, is I might choose to contract for a service. I put parameters on it. I'm going to give you some examples that Hamilton County will be contract for now. This is not an exhaustive list. I contract for window washing in my buildings. I contract for my janitor service. I contract for my security service. I contract for dog boarding services. The Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals does my dog boarding function. Those aren't government employees, that's a nonprofit entity. I contract with them for that. There's a whole host of other things we contract. But I think it's safe to say we do not contract any of our big core services. We don't contract out the jail, though there is a market for that. We don't contract out the adjudication of justice, i.e. the courthouse. Not much of a market for that. We do contract out our parking operations. We run a very large facility on the riverfront and on Main Street. It's been run with a private company for over a decade. We don't contract out the benefits administration in the JFS department, food stamp eligibility, things like that. A lot of people say, why don't you run government like a business? Well, believe it or not, we do. I actually get this magazine, it's a local magazine called Smart Business. It goes to all the CEOs in the region. And interestingly, I opened it up this week and I was kind of thinking about preparing for this, and there's a story in here about the outsourcing challenge. In the private sector, they call it outsourcing. In the public sector, they seem to call it contracting out. It's the same kind of concept. And it talks about the pitfalls of outsourcing, if you will. And I actually have a list here, and I didn't bring copies. We have an internal, informal policy. How do we decide things we're going to contract for? It comes down to 2 or 3 things. One is it something we need flexible control over? For example, if there's not a market, I'm going to give you an example. We tried to contract for fire hydrant maintenance. We have 3,000 fire hydrants in the county. And about on any given day, there's a drunk driver hitting one of them. Okay? For public safety purposes, we want those up and running immediately, within 24 hours. But when I put it out to bid, I couldn't guarantee work to a company. They would have to maintain a presence, equipment, and trucks to be on call 24/7, 365, and guarantee that my fire hydrant would be up and running again, replaced on a holiday within 24 hours. Nobody bid on it. There isn't a plumbing company in this region or nationwide that's going to bid on a contract that doesn't have guaranteed work. Makes them keep people on 24/7 on call, trucks, equipment, extra fire hydrants and inventory, but no guarantee for work. What if MAD, the Mothers Against Drunk Driving, is very successful and there's no broken fire hydrants for the year? You can't make any money as a business. So there's an example. We tried to put it out to bid, but there was no market for it. You got to have vendors. If we were to try to put out our 911 system for privatization or contracting, there's no market for it. What if that company went out of business? What if there was a job action? those types of things. We can't have those types of services disrupted because of internal turmoil in the provider. And I'll give you a good example there. We do contract for security services. And believe it or not, yesterday afternoon, I saw something I hope I never see again from our contract security guard. And I called the company. I called the facility manager, and he called the company within 20 minutes. The man was escorted off the property and gone. I can do that with a contractor, but had that person been a county employee, write up an incident report, expect 2 or 3 grievances, do an investigation, it would drag on for months. Private contractor, I can call and say, you're gone. Private contractor doesn't, I don't have to worry about employees that are calling in sick, or they're injured, or a relative died, or they're pregnant. If I contract for a service, I get a person. I don't get excuses. But on the flip side, I got 4,800 employees that work for the county. And of those, I have 11 unions, about half our employees are in unions of various sorts. ASME is actually our biggest union, about 500-600 employees in ASME. So we look at it from a business case. We're always looking for an opportunity to do it, but we balance in making sure that there's a market for it. So if a company goes belly up, I can get another company in here quickly. Can't have the 911 system being idle. There's flexibility in providing the service, meaning the company is scalable, they can cut up or down, that type of thing. Right now in my facilities department, which is not outsourced, if I had a windstorm and I had to pick up a bunch of trash, I could pull painters and they could pick up trash, or I could pull it. I mean, I have flexibility. I don't have that flexibility because I have a very tight contract. And I'll give you an example of a bad privatization project. About 10 years ago, I was working on the East Coast, and we decided to outsource our vehicle fleet maintenance. Over 4,000 cars, big East Coast city. We wrote a contract up, and we had a price list. They won the contract. There was a price list for oil change, and there was a price list for putting light bars on the police car, and there was a price list for changing windshield wipers. And you can imagine all the maintenance that has to happen on a car, a truck, a motorcycle, and this list was like this thick. And it went out to bid, and a firm won. One of the problems with getting into contracting, you've got to have people who know how to manage a contract. So we took the fleet manager, and they got rid of all the fleet mechanics and said, we don't need you anymore. I don't know where they went, but anyway, they were all let go. Maybe they joined the new company. And the fleet manager, we gave him a multi-million-dollar contract. So you manage this fleet management contract. He didn't know what to do. He knew how to deal with his employees and get the oil change done, but he didn't know how to manage a contract. And about 6 months into it, we were like $6 or $7 million over contract. Because what was happening in the past, you bring your police car in and you say, hey, can you vacuum it out? It's kind of a mess. And you know that light's kind of bothering me. You had one person who would do all that stuff. And there was no question asked for a city employee. Once it became a contract, you got charged every time they did something. They vacuum it out, $7. Change the light bulb, $15. Switch out the wiper blades, $10. And after 6 months, the contract manager wasn't watching any of that. And then all of a sudden it was millions of dollars. And then you realize that when you have the staff in-house, how much flexibility do you have? A friend of mine works for P&G, and P&G outsources all of their facilities. And he's a contractor in the food service business. And if he wants to move a table in a room like this, he can't do it. He has to call the contractor who does facility maintenance, and they move it, and they charge P&G like $75 to set up a room like this, and then another $75 to break it down. But if you had your own staff, you'd say, hey, can you set up a room to gives you flexibility. Those are the trade-offs you have to think about when you're contracting out. Right now, I think the county has a pretty good balance of what we contract out versus what we do. I can say from my board, and I can say this from a policy perspective, because I work for 3 elected officials, that if we ever were to consider a large contracting out, I'm pretty sure all 3 would have a position that you'd have to demonstrate real savings. We're not going to